Well, Razorback fans, fall baseball has officially come to an end after Arkansas's nice exhibition series against Oklahoma State, which they won 2 out of 3. We're going to take a look at some of the top performers in fall ball and look ahead to the spring at some of our biggest remaining questions for the Arkansas Razorback baseball team on today's Locked On Razorbacks podcast.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, so before I get into this, I do just want to get in front of this because I'm sure that some of you guys, the loyal listeners who have been paying attention each week, you know a little bit of these. These are names that are not going to be under the radar. Hey, there's nothing that we don't know. There's no more surprises at this point, I don't think. So if I feels like I'm repeating myself or you're like, hey, I already knew Brent Iredale was good. I already knew all these guys were already good. It's fine. But I did just, since we are now at the end of fall ball, we have some stats, which I've been citing stats here a little bit throughout the show these last few weeks. But now that the fall is over and there won't be any more added for at least a couple more months once we get into spring ball, I wanted to just kind of put all these together and hand out some superlatives, some awards for fall baseball, you know, top performers, things of that nature, as our guy Sam Pittman says. So here we are. Without further ado, let's just jump right into it. I'm going to start with one that, again, you guys are probably tired of hearing about at this point. But the offensive MVP for the Arkansas Razorbacks in fall baseball practice has been Brent Iredale, the New Mexico junior college transfer from Australia. We did get a chance to talk to him the other day, and he has an Australian accent. I am pleased to report it was the first time I got to really hear him talk. He does have an Australian accent. And guys, look, I know, again, I've been saying his name a lot. You know by now he's good. He finished the fall hitting .463. He was 19 of 41 at the plate, .463, had 5 home runs, 2 doubles, led the team with 17 runs driven in, led the team with 15 runs, also added 6 stolen bases. Just a really well-rounded effort from Brent Iredale, which I feel like is something that we should come to expect. Dave Van Horn even said he's a little bit better athlete than they thought they were getting, frankly. They knew he could hit. They knew he had some power, but I think I was just impressed by how consistent he was, how well-rounded he was. I will say, you know, we haven't talked a ton about defense and fielding really on these podcasts because, you know, nobody wants to hear about that garbage. You want to hear about the bombs. But Brent Iredale, I got to be honest, a pretty solid defender there at third base. He was charged with an error in the Oklahoma State series, which, by the way, he went 4 for 7 against Oklahoma State. Actually went 4 for 4 in the first game and 0 for 3 in the second game. But I mean, you know, so to see him do it against legitimate competition or get against someone other than Arkansas has to make you feel good. But yeah, he was charged with an error in that series. But Reese Robinette, who I love, and we're actually going to reference a little bit later, Reese Robinette, who I love, that was his first game playing first base. And I feel like once he gets a few more reps under his belt, and we'll see if he sticks around there at first base. But just my point is, if you have a normal first base situation going over there, probably is a throw that would have been scooped, and it was a tough play anyways. Probably could have been ruled an infield single. But that was like the only error I can really remember Brent Iredale making. I'd have to go back and really sift through all the game logs, but he was really solid, really consistent at third base. He's a good athlete on the base pass. I mean, I mentioned the 6 stolen bases. He stole third base at least once. Runs well. I mean, he's about as well-rounded as it gets. And I think I've thrown this comp out there. He reminds me a little bit of Caden Wallace with just how well-rounded he is. He's also a big guy, like in frame. They're actually pretty similar as well. You guys are going to love Brent Iredale. If you got out to the ballpark and seen him at all this fall, I'm not breaking any news to you. You guys are going to love him. I feel like every year there's one newcomer where it's just obvious right away. Wehiwa Aloy was that guy last year. Like just the day he walked through the door, you just looked at him, you see him swing, and you're like, okay, that guy's really good. He's really talented. Obviously, I feel like, you know, Wehiwa Aloy lived up to that for the most part with his season last year. Caleb Cali was that guy a couple of years ago where just in fall practice, it took about 1 week. And honestly, Tavian Josenberger's one where it didn't take too long to realize he was pretty good. But usually the ones that are just consistent, everyday, middle of the order guys, it doesn't take too long to figure that out. And that was certainly the case with Brent Iredale. And I think you guys are going to absolutely love him. So I'm hoping he doesn't do the thing that Caleb Cali and Wehiwa Aloy did, where he starts a little bit slow to his Razorback career. But regardless, again, I feel pretty good at putting my eggs in the Brent Iredale basket. And another guy I feel really good about after this fall practice, my pitching MVP for the Arkansas Razorbacks this fall. Could have made an argument for a few guys, but I went with Gage Wood, man. Again, I don't know what his role is going to end up being. Is he going to be a starter? Is he going to be the top reliever in the staff? Is he going to be closing? Like, who knows? Maybe a little bit of mix of everything. He's capable of doing it all. I was really impressed with Gage Wood, and it just seems like he's taken the necessary strides that you would like to see a guy like that take going into his junior year. His velo is more consistent, and his velo was never really an issue. I mean, his fastball, even though it was typically in that 92, 94 range, has a lot of that rising action to it. So it really played a lot faster and a lot harder than it probably even seemed on the radar gun. His fastball was consistently in that 94 to 96 range. The other day when he was throwing 2 innings, was touching 96 consistently. I feel like his fastball is better. He's got better command of all of his secondary stuff. Just to run through the numbers right quick, he throws 10 innings this fall, goes 5 hits, 3 runs, 3 walks, 18 strikeouts. Opponents hit 147 against Gage Wood this fall. A whip under 1 at 0.8, which I believe was the best on the team. I mean, just a really good, really well-rounded effort from Gage Wood this fall. And that's following a summer in the Cape where he didn't throw a ton, but had some nice moments there in the Cape, getting some experience, starting games. I feel like if Arkansas wants to go that route, I feel completely comfortable with Gage Wood as a legitimate weekend starter on this team. I also will feel comfortable if they choose to go with a little bit of a do-everything reliever route with him. Who knows? I mean, it's going to be really tough, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, because that's one of my biggest questions going into the fall is kind of what you do with some of these guys in their roles. But Gage Wood, ultimately, it doesn't matter when he's pitching. And like I said, we're talking about a guy who's pitched the first inning, he's pitched the 9th inning, he's pitched all the innings in between. Like, regardless of what the situation is, I feel a lot better about Gage Wood. Not that I didn't feel great about him. I just feel like he was good as a freshman. He got a little bit better as a sophomore and turned into a legitimate, real piece for Arkansas. As a junior, I feel like he's taken another nice little step up. You love to see that development. You love to see Matt Hobbs continue to make these in-state monsters, which, by the way, Arkansas doesn't have a ton of in-state guys on this team, frankly, especially on the position player regard. But it's really good to see a guy from the state of Arkansas representing Batesville out there doing the thing, man. He's going to be one of the fan favorites, I would imagine. Probably going to be a team captain of something of that sort. So good to see that stuff from Gage Wood. This next superlative I want to get out, most underrated performance. And now this isn't necessarily most underrated player, although I guess you could make that argument. Really, it's a guy that I feel like I haven't spoken to you guys a ton about. And he's one that, like, you know, he's almost a victim of like the standard he's set. And this is Logan Maxwell, the TCU transfer I'm referencing. Again, he hit 300 in each of his last 2 seasons at TCU. So when you see that, you automatically think, all right, yeah, you should just hit 300. Like, that's what you should do. And so it's almost like not something you write home about when he does exactly what he's supposed to do. But Logan Maxwell, man, he really turned it on the last few weeks of fall practice, because there was a moment there, maybe like 4 or 5 scrimmages in, where I was like, man, he's been a little bit quiet. Does he really have a ton of power? Like, I was kind of like not questioning the man, but I was kind of wondering. I was like, are we 100% sure that he's like a surefire lock to be a starter? I feel like by the end of fall practice, he certainly cleared up any doubt in that regard as well. Just to run through the numbers real quick on Logan Maxwell, 15 of 45, so that's 333. That's 1 and 3. Easy to do that math there. He had 3 doubles. He hit 2 home runs, both of which came in the last like 10 days of fall practice. So it seemed like he found a little bit of some groove there. He hit an opposite field home run against Oklahoma State, and the wind was kind of gently going out to that direction. But I was impressed with that. He had a couple balls off the wall too. So it's like there's some like legitimate line drive type of power there. Again, we're not saying this is going to be a guy that's going to hit 15, 20 home runs, nothing crazy like that. Although a lot of transfers under Nate Thompson here at Arkansas have seen their power increase. I don't know if I'm ready to say he's going to go full on Tavian Josenberger and go from like 3 career home runs to 12 or whatever it was that Tavian did. But I think Logan Maxwell's a guy who, again, is going to get on base, is going to hit for a high average. And I think there's a little bit of pop in there. And so I wouldn't be surprised if you see him hit maybe 6, 7, 8 home runs with how he's able to get on base. Like, you'll take that any day of the week. And speaking of that ability to get on base, he drew 8 walks and was hit by 3 pitches. And he had 9 strikeouts in, about 55 plate appearances, 55 to 60 in that range. Also stole a couple bases as well. So, I mean, you're talking about more free passes than walks. His on-base percentage finished just under 500, one of the highest of the team. Just really impressive stuff. And he's a left-handed bat. And I think the most impressive thing about him is that they feel really good about him again hitting lefties, his ability to hit lefties as a left-handed hitter. Now, again, most of his power is going to be against righties, I would imagine. But I feel like this is a guy that no matter what, like you just can keep in that lineup. You can sharpie him in. You don't have to worry about it. Veteran, got some experience, hits the ball to left field, hits the ball to right field, line drives, has some speed as well to beat out a ground ball. Like overall, Logan Maxwell is just a guy you can depend on. And I feel like this Arkansas lineup could absolutely use guys like that. And we are going to talk about a few more of these last superlatives after a quick break. ZBiotics. ZBiotics is a pre-alcoholic probiotic drink. It is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink alcohol, alcohol gets it converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day, some of those hangovers. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make ZBiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly and you'll feel your best tomorrow. You don't want to be hungover when you're watching the NFL London game, which comes on at 8:30 a.m. these days. I tried to miss it the other day. You want to be able to go to the tailgate, have a good time with your buddies, watch Arkansas's game, although this past one didn't go too well for them, and enjoy yourself and then be able to function the next day. If you got to go to church in the morning, whatever the case may be, go to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use the code lockedoncollege at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with 100% money back guaranteed. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money. No questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege and use that code at checkout for 15% off of your order. Okay, a few more of these superlatives I wanted to touch on. And now this next one is another one that I feel like you guys have heard about enough, and you're probably tired of hearing me talk about this kid. But Kehio Aloy is my biggest surprise of fall practice. Now, just full disclosure, this could have also gone to another guy you guys have heard me talk about a good bit, in Brent Clark, the freshman outfielder who, I'll be honest with you, I was stunned, but to see how productive he was in his first fall on campus, I was really impressed, man. It's not that I didn't think that he or Kehio Aloy were good. It's just you kind of expect there to be a little bit of a transition, a little bit of a rough patch for these guys. And honestly, for Kehio Aloy, there was a little bit of a transition period there. Took him a while to settle into facing the type of arms you face at Arkansas, which is natural for all these guys. But the reason I went with Kehio over Brent Clark is because of just what Kehio was able to do, which is he turned himself into a nice pickup that you kind of see like, okay, they're bringing in Wehiwa's brother just to kind of, bring him on. It's fine. Maybe he'll DH. Maybe he'll be a pinch hitter, to where now I feel like, and I know the team feels like, Dave Van Horn, a lot of fans that have been paying attention feel like he's kind of a lock to be in the lineup somewhat of every day. Will that be at DH? Will that be at first base? And will it be every day? We'll see. But he's absolutely going to be a factor in this lineup and in that first base competition. And I don't even think I would have really given him that credit. I'll just be honest, when he first got to campus. And so he's been my biggest surprise. I think we knew some power was in there. I think he hit 9 home runs as a freshman at BYU, which is certainly nothing to scoff at. But I don't think I knew he had this much power. And I mean, when I say this much power, he had a few of the hardest hit balls of the entire fall. Talking exit velo, I'm talking about distance. I mean, he had a 424-foot home run off of Will McIntyre. I believe there was a 440 at one point. He was going opposite field a lot. A lot of his base hits that were not home runs did go to opposite field as well. So that really makes me feel like he's going to be able to hit high velocity. He's going to be able to hit off speed. I really like, I mean, it's not, I know sometimes it can get a little bit overrated, the ability to go oppo, because everyone kind of likes that. And they like to tell themselves they're smart, where they're like, oh, if he's good, but can he hit oppo? Because, I mean, you see a lot of the best hitters in the big leagues that don't go oppo. So it's not the end all be all. But it's always a nice sign when you see that ability, when you see someone that has it in their bag, especially if I'm just being honest, someone who strikes out as much as he does. And let's be clear, Kehio is going to strike out a lot. In fact, the only player on the roster who struck out more than Kehio at Arkansas this fall was his brother, Wehiwa, who we all know is very good at baseball. He's going to strike out, but it's really just one of those, and Dave Van Horn said it best, he doesn't get cheated when he swings. And you know what I mean by that. If you watch Brady Slavin's play, you kind of understand that narrative a little bit. Now, again, I expect him to shorten up with 2 strikes. I think he's got that ability to, like I said, go the other way, get his base hits when he needs. But, man, I think this is a guy that's really going to hit the ball with authority. And we'll touch on it in a little bit. But I didn't think that his competitors at first base were even that bad. It's not like he's going to start by default. I feel like he kind of shoehorned his way into this conversation, which is really impressive. Just to go through the numbers real quick before we move on, he was 11 for 41 this fall, so 268 batting average. Not going to like blow you away or anything. That's about what he hit as a freshman. But I feel like if he's able to replicate that and hit 270 in the SEC with the kind of power that he brings to the table, and especially because you're talking about a guy that's probably going to hit in the bottom third of the lineup, you'll take that a lot, especially with the power he's bringing to the table. He hit 4 home runs this fall, which is second on the team. He drove in 11 runs, scored 10 of his own, drew 3 walks. But honestly, I was surprised when I saw that number when I was looking at the stats, because they've all the coaches have complimented him for having a pretty good eye, a pretty patient approach. And so again, he's going to be one of those guys that will take his walks. He'll work the count a little bit. He had a couple really good at-bats against Oklahoma State, had some 2-strike, go the other way hits, had some fall down 0-2 and work your way back into the count and draw a walk type of at-bats. I felt like he got better and better throughout the fall. And again, this is a guy who is a work in progress. He came to college at BYU as a pitcher and is now kind of learning how to play first base. But he's also kind of getting used to seeing this level of pitching. So for him to kind of make those adjustments in real time and have the performances that he had down the stretch in fall practice, I think it speaks volumes to what kind of kid he is, what kind of talent he might be. And I'm very much bullish on what he can be for this Arkansas lineup. Again, we'll see if it ends up being every day, but Kehio Aloy has made a believer out of me, and I've been really impressed. And so I'm looking forward to seeing if he can pick it up in the spring and if he can carry it into the season. And this last little category, now this is just a little bit of a weird one. There's no real criteria for this. I'm calling it the bombastic bump. And so I was actually thinking about this the other day. Throughout the season, before each series that Arkansas plays, I think I'm going to pick one player each week, might do a hitter and a pitcher, which is what I've done here, where I'm just like, this is kind of my guy for the week. I think that he's going to have a big week, kind of like predicting, we do our bold predictions in football, Curtis and I, kind of just predicting who I think is going to have the big performance of the week. And we're going to try to have some fun with that throughout the year. But I just went bombastic bump. This is my guy. These 2 guys that I'm about to list. I'm just like, I'm taking ownership over them. Any success they have, I want you guys to credit me for. I'm joking for the most part. But this first guy, I do want to take a little bit of credit for, because I feel like I've been hyping him up a good bit since he got to campus. He obviously came on the Bombastic podcast last year. He's one of my first ever guests, which we really appreciate him for doing that. And it's Nolan Souza. And Nolan Souza has also been playing some damn good baseball this fall, but frankly, guys, I couldn't find a category that really fit to give Nolan Souza an award, but I just wanted to give Nolan Souza something because I really have been impressed with the way that he's progressed this fall. I am very much a believer in his upside. And again, kind of like with Gage Wood, I was saying, he's taking the strides you want to see a guy like him, a talented guy who you could see the flashes of last year. He's taking those steps. He's getting better and better each week. And really, I mean, like, you saw what he could do when everything's going right. He's got as much power as anyone on the team. He can go to left field, he can go to right field. He's a good athlete on the base paths. Like, you could see the vision of what he could be. He had plenty of great moments as a freshman. It's just the consistency that you want to see more of. You want to see if he can do it week in and week out and be a guy you really depend on in the lineup. And we'll see where he ends up, if he's going to hit 5th, if he's going to hit 2nd, if he's going to hit 6th, 7th, like whatever. But wherever he ends up in the Arkansas lineup, I personally am going to have a lot of confidence in him. To go through some numbers real quick, he was 10 for 35 this fall, which is a 286 batting average, which, if that underwhelms you a little bit, he led the team in walks. He drew 9 walks, was hit by a couple pitches. So the on-base percentage was up over 400. And that's OPS also was up 937. Those numbers I just read you, and he had 2 home runs and 2 walks, which obviously, when in a real season, you have higher sample size of those. 937 OPS, 286 batting average. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility for him to do for a full season as a sophomore. And if he's able to do that, those numbers I just read you, he's going to be one of the top draft prospects in the country going into his junior year. And I think he's got that kind of upside, that kind of capability. He also led the team with 13 stolen bases on 14 attempts, which was really impressive. And again, we know the power's in there. And frankly, you can make an argument that he probably could have shown a little bit. Like, he only had 2 home runs and 2 walks, or and 2 doubles, which for a guy, with as much power as him, I'd expect that to go up a little bit here in the spring. But I was really impressed with the approach and the discipline that he showed at the plate. He's very patient. I mean, you see the walk numbers, and you see how dangerous he is once he gets on base with the stolen bases. But I just was really impressed with his ability to battle with 2 strikes, to hit some of those left-handed pitchers. Because, I mean, Arkansas's got some lefties. And he had to face a good bit of them. I mean, you're thinking Zach Root and Landon Beidelshees as starters. You got a guy in Parker Coyle who's got a ton of experience. He had a nice little fall as well. A couple freshmen like Luke Williams, Tucker Holland, who's got really good stuff as well. Jack Smith, who, might not be with the team anymore, but has really good stuff as a left-handed pitcher. So it's like, if you're at Arkansas and you're playing in these scrimmages, you're facing some legitimate left-handed competition, one of which I'm about to reference here in a second. I feel like that's a good test for someone like Nolan Souza, who's trying to prove that he can be that everyday consistent player. I thought he took a lot of strides, had a lot of 2-strike base hits where he would just shorten up and poke the ball to center field, left field, whatever the case may be. He went 3 for 8 against Oklahoma State as well. Had a couple really good swings in that series. It's just good to see. I was really impressed with Nolan Souza. That's my guy. He's going to be one of my favorite Hogs on the team. By the time he leaves Fayetteville, man, he's going to be one of my favorite Hogs probably ever. I've just been a really big fan of the kid and really like the way he plays, and I like the way his career is headed. Another guy that I would like to go ahead and get on the right side of history on is one of those left-handed pitchers I was talking about, Cole Gibler, the true freshman from Texas who, was one of those highly touted draft prospects who you think, oh, is he going to go? Is he not? Whatever. We'll see. He ends up getting to campus. Of course, Carson Wiggins, everyone was raving about Carson Wiggins after last week's performance against Oklahoma State, which they should be. Carson Wiggins is a dude. He's going to help Arkansas very soon, like way sooner rather than later. He might be closing games for Arkansas. He's that talented of a kid. Cole Gibler does not have that level of like raw stuff. He's a left-handed pitcher that's 93, 94 here and there, maybe some 92. If he's starting, he'll probably be in more in that like 91, 93 range. So again, it's not going to be one of those like, oh, blow you away. But he just really knows how to pitch. He walked 5 hitters this fall in 8 2/3 innings, only allowed 3 hits, 16 strikeouts, and only 2 runs. So, 8 2/3, so not quite 9 innings, 2 runs. I guess that's an ERA of like 2.11, something like that. And a 115 opponent's batting average. And again, he was starting a lot of games, facing the top of these Arkansas lineups. And again, we talk about that adjustment period that you kind of expect for freshmen that, frankly, Carson Wiggins endured. His first couple of scrimmages didn't go too well. You just come to expect that from these freshman arms. So when you have someone like Gibler who comes in and just dominates right away, which is what he did, he was dominant this fall, speaks volumes about just kind of his readiness to contribute for Arkansas right away. I was actually talking to my buddy Andrew Hutchinson about this, and we were like, what are they going to do with Gibler? Because, he's probably not going to be in the starting rotation as a true freshman, given some of the guys that they brought in, someone like Gage Wood and Gabe Gackle, who are obviously going to be, heavily featured in that conversation. I don't think Gibler is going to be a starter on the weekend as a true freshman, although we'll see. If he keeps it up, who knows? Might have no choice. I do think they're probably going to use him as the midweek starter, but I also think they're going to use him on the weekends, maybe for an at-bat here or there, maybe an inning here and there. He's left-handed, so clearly he's a candidate for left-on-left matchups. But I would imagine that by the time SEC play rolls around, Arkansas is going to have a real decision to make where they're like, hey, we're using this guy as a midweek starter, and he's going 4 or 5 and shutting down all the, Little Rock and whoever. But we really might need this dude for 2 or 3 innings on the weekend. I think they're going to have to make a decision on, okay, where do we prepare him for the next, for his future as a midweek starter, or do we just use him as one of our top relievers? I think he's that good that he can help Arkansas right away, and we'll see how they handle the workload because they've had a couple freshmen that they maybe would like to have seen a little bit smaller of a workload with the last few years, like a Gage Wood and even Gabe Gackle last year, who they really relied on a lot, and Brady Tiger before him. So hopefully they don't overuse him, but I think Cole Gibler is good enough where he's going to have to force them to make some interesting decisions in terms of his usage. And next we will be talking about some of my biggest remaining questions for this team as we enter spring ball. And there's plenty of time to dissect it. It's October 21st. We're going to continue talking baseball, but these are just big picture. These are kind of the biggest questions that I have entering fall practice. And we will get into it after one more quick break. Folks, it's game time. It's always game time. And game time, there's nothing better than attending a live event, whether it's sports, whether it's concerts. There's nothing better than just being there, being a part of the atmosphere. All of the fans that attended the Arkansas LSU game might disagree a little bit. But whether you're going to sports or music or whatever the case may be, game time has made it easier to see the best things with the best deals, getting the best seats so you don't have to sift through thousands of different tickets. The new Game Time Picks feature has made it easier to see your favorite teams play live. They filter out all the fluff to only show you incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Their Game Time's Picks feature offers curation that makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, all-in pricing. You get to get a look at your seat before, so you know what it's going to look like, kind of get the vibe set. You get the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. And you also have Game Time ticket coverage, which has you covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with the Game Time Picks feature. If you want to go see Arkansas play Mississippi State this weekend, hear the cowbells, hear all that loud stuff. I know tickets are still lower bowl tickets as low as $30 on Game Time. So go check it out. Go see your Hogs play. Go to Game Time and use the code LOCKEDONCollege. Okay. So moving on just a little bit, there's a ton we've talked about all fall, and look, you guys are probably sick of hearing me talk about some of these topics a little bit. But just my biggest questions entering spring practice for the Arkansas Razorbacks, it's got to start for me with first base. Are we going to get any clarity there? So in the scrimmages, or at least in the scrimmages, they would mostly the same guys as Michael Anderson, Kehio Aloy, that were playing first base for either team, and then randomly. Last week against Oklahoma State in game 1, Reese Robinette gets the nod at first base, which we kind of felt like would be the case. And Reese Robinette had a pretty solid fall after a really, really good summer. And he's clearly a candidate to start, whether it's at first base or DH. But he'd been mostly playing third base behind Brent Iredale, and I don't think that spot's really up for grabs. So it kind of made sense that if Reese Robinette's going to be in the lineup, it's going to be at first base. And Kehio got the nod the week before when Arkansas was doing the Fall Classic, where they were playing in front of a bunch of fans. And so I think Kehio is absolutely going to be a factor in this conversation. Defensively, he's got a little bit of work to do because he didn't play the field at all last year, and he came in as a pitcher. So, I think he's the most raw of these three guys, although I did just mention that Reese Robinette is kind of getting used to playing first base because he's a third baseman in high school, hasn't seen a ton of time there in the fall. So I'd imagine in the spring they're going to be rotating all three, these two guys, and Michael Anderson, who I feel like entered the fall as the prohibited, kind of the assumed starter there. This is a guy that transferred from Rhode Island, has a ton of power, has a ton of experience as well. And I feel like defensively, Michael Anderson is the best option, and DVH has said so himself. All three big dudes who kind of look the part as first baseman. And I didn't think Michael Anderson was bad. Didn't hit for a super high average this fall, but flashed with 3 or 4 home runs. You see the next level power. Again, just like Kehio, he's going to strike out a good bit, but I feel like he brings enough as a defender and as a power threat to where he's absolutely worth playing here and there in the lineup. And we'll see if either of these guys are able to really emerge as the guy at first base. It felt for a while there like Kehio might be doing that. Then he goes 0 for 4 in the Fall Classic, and you're like, all right, maybe not. But then he played really well against Oklahoma State. He got the starting nod in both of those games, or in the first 2 games, I should say. And look, he may be first base, maybe DH. But again, this kind of ties into my next point, which is Kendall Diggs' health. And I think that's another big question mark I have as we enter the spring. Now, I spoke to Kendall the other day, and he seemed perfectly fine. Seemed like he's ready to roll. He'll be ready for the start of the season, it seems like. And now we'll see. Is he going to be really ready to play the field? Because if he's not, that means he's going to be DHing. Because Kendall Diggs is not going to not be in this lineup if he's healthy. Contrary to what your buddy at the bar tells you, Kendall Diggs is going to be in this starting lineup. And so if it's not in the outfield, it's going to be at the DH spot, which kind of means if Kehio Aloy is going to be starting, it would need to be at first base. You see where I'm going with this here? It becomes a little bit of a controversy. It becomes a little bit of an issue. And so I think it's key for one of these three guys, whether it's Kehio, Reese Robinette, or Michael Anderson, to really solidify themselves as the starter at first base. And this might play out into the season. That's perfectly fine. We see it happen all the time. And honestly, Arkansas has enough surefire starters at other positions to where they can make it work. But I do think it's kind of important that there's some clarity that happens there, because I think when Kendall Diggs comes back, and again, Rocco Pepe's another guy that was banged up a little bit in fall practice, you assume both of those guys are starting. And so you've got Charles Davalon in center field. You've got Logan Maxwell at either one of the corner spots. If Pepe is healthy, I feel like he's a pretty solid, surefire starter at either of the corner spots as well. So then with Kendall Diggs healthy, you've got a little bit of an issue anyway. And so I feel like whoever it is at first base, if you're counting on, oh yeah, I can start at DH, I don't know if you can, because when Pepe and Diggs are back, one of those guys is going to be in the DH spot. And Logan Maxwell, I guess I should mention, also has DH'd at TCU. So I feel like he also could be the front runner to start there if he's not playing the outfield. So you've really got 4 outfielders, all of which we feel pretty good about starting. One of them is going to end up at DH, which means Kehio, there's a little bit of pressure on him. Like if he's going to start, it probably has to be at first base. And so we'll see how that plays out. And then moving on to the pitching side, the biggest question I have, we'll talk closer, down the road. I feel like as the season gets closer, we can kind of figure that out. And really, it really doesn't matter until you get really to SEC play. And we see it happen all the time where the closer kind of evolves over time. I mean, there was times last year where Will McIntyre was closing games for Arkansas. We'll see it evolve a little bit. I feel like Arkansas sometimes might use multiple different guys, could see different guys in that role. But I feel like that's a conversation we can continue to have at a later date. But for me, it really all starts with the pitching staff with the starting rotation. Now, week 1, Arkansas plays 4 games. So Wood, Root, Beidelshees, and Gackle, you would assume would all 4 be the starters there. But what's that going to look like moving forward? One of those guys, just mathematically, is not going to be starting once you get into a 3-game series, once you get into SEC play and you cut it down, really. And I mentioned, I think Cole Gibbler is probably the best bet to be the midweek starter. I don't imagine you're going to ask either of those veteran guys to be the midweek starter. And so, again, what does that look like? Does that mean Gage Wood kind of goes to the bullpen? Does that mean Zach Root, who had some ups and downs in the fall but finished really strong? I don't think he really makes a ton of sense in the bullpen. I feel like he's kind of a surefire starter type of guy. I mean, he throws 4 pitches, mixes them all well, and he's one of those guys who's almost as good in the 3rd and 4th inning as he is in the 1st. Like, he's not a power pitcher necessarily, so I feel like he makes a lot of sense as a starter. And Dave Van Horn mentioned that Gabe Gackle is pretty much the top guy. He was the top guy that got the starting nod against Oklahoma State, and DVH said he's absolutely going to be the first or second guy in the rotation, which kind of, eliminates one of those potential options of a guy you could move to the bullpen. I feel like I kind of agree with Dave where Gackle's a surefire starter. I think Root is a surefire starter. I feel like it's between Beidelshees and Gage Wood. And I'll be honest with you, I hadn't considered Beidelshees as a potential bullpen guy until the other day against Oklahoma State when he came in and was 96, 97 every pitch. He threw 1 non-fastball. I think he mixed in a slider 1 time. But he literally threw like 14 out of 15 fastballs, all 96, 97. And I looked at it and I thought, man, that kind of looks like what you would want your closer to look like, don't you think? Now, obviously, Christian Fouch is going to be a factor in that closer conversation. Carson Wiggins is going to be a factor in that closer conversation. Gage Wood potentially has closed a lot of games. He could be in that conversation. So we'll see what it looks like. But that was the first time I considered it. And I even asked Landon Beidelshees about it. I was like, dude, kind of looked like a closer out there, and he downplayed it. He was like, oh, I knew I was only throwing 1 inning, and so, it is what it is. That's just kind of how it is. I think he's still probably planning on being a starting pitcher and used in that role. And so I really do wonder, and again, whoever doesn't get the starting nod, it's not like a big deal. I mean, they're going to get used a ton regardless, and they're going to be very overqualified for whatever role they have. But as we enter the spring, I'm going to be very interested to see what the conversations are around those 4 guys, which one of those guys kind of steps up and is like, all right, I'll be the guy who's going to be the do everything closer. I mentioned Evan Ashenbank a lot and how A&M used him, especially down the stretch last year where, some games he would throw 4 or 5 innings in relief. He did that against Arkansas. Maybe he'll come in and throw 2 on Friday and 2 on Sunday, like that kind of thing. I could see whoever's not the 3rd starter there evolving into that sort of a role. Guys, I've gone over my allotted time anyway, so I got to get out of here a little bit. But I appreciate you for tapping in with the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. I know it's basketball season coming up. I know football's still kicking there. We'll see if they're gonna bounce back. But guys, the baseball conversation are never going to stop in this Ellis household. So leave a comment below. Whatever you want to see me discuss, I'm absolutely down to. We might end up doing some type of a mailbag thing similar to what Curtis has been doing with basketball. But we look forward to continuing the discussion. And like I said, there's plenty of time between now and February for us to continue to dive into every single angle of this Arkansas baseball team. But I appreciate you joining me on today's edition of the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. You guys